Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for coming. So I will call to order the Business Retention Standing Subcommittee. This is a special meeting. We'll go ahead and start with public testimony for agenda items only. We normally have this be a more informal meeting, unlike city council meetings where it's maybe more difficult to participate. We do try to allow people to sit up here at the table and participate, but we have a lot of people today and we want to be mindful of time. So right now we'll ask for anyone who has public testimony about any of the items on the agenda. So if you do, you can raise your hand. By the way, I'm Christy Holstedge, City Council Member, City of Palm Springs, Mayor Pro Tem Jeff Kors, Jay Verrata, our Director of Economic Development. The people at the table, would you like to quickly introduce yourselves?
Do you want me to start? Nona Watson, I'm the Chamber CEO here in Palm Springs.
I'm Joy Meredith. I'm the president of Main Street and a small business owner in Palm Springs ×2.
Dave Powell, Executive Director of Desert Business Association and the Administrator for the Arenas District Merchants.
I'm Jeffrey Bernstein. I'm the owner of Destination PSP on the Main Street Board and a Measure J Commissioner.
Kathy Van Horn, City of Palm Springs, Economic Development.
Anyone have public comment, please raise your hand and come to a microphone.
And we always like to tell folks, this is being both video and audio recorded, so it can be on Channel 17, and we have it available to the public.
And please, if you can, say your name if you'd like, and if you work or operate a business in Palm Springs.
Okay, well, I'm Jeffrey Bernstein again. I own Destination PSP on the board of Main Street. And I hope it counts as agenda item. I was going to give just a recap of the PopUp Palm Springs event, which I guess is a business liaison activity. The event took place April 16th. We prepared the whole thing in about 6 weeks. We ended up with over 50 different businesses and organizations participating. Not all of them were retail. We had the American Legion, we had Barton CPA, we had Buddha Bullying, we had the Public Arts Commission, yoga, so there was a whole variety. It was all run by volunteers, although we did have a hired PR firm. And we ended up with having press, print press, online press, several television interviews, a couple of radio, so there was great exposure. And the idea was to get traffic down to Palm Springs on a midweek between Coachella when it's normally very slow. So I know a number of businesses, mine included, had significantly increased traffic and business that day. We had 2 to 3 times our normal business for that Tuesday, and I know some others did. So there's a lot of interest in doing it again, including from people who did not participate. Some businesses didn't quite know what it was or didn't have time to do something, so we know with more planning it could do better. The city did contribute $1,000, which was great, and thank you very much. We estimate businesses donated another $1,000 worth of prizes, and I'm estimating about 4 to 5 times that in costs that they spent on doing events in their own locations. So it seemed well worth it, and it was good, it was successful, and hopefully it could get bigger and we could do more events. I do want to just suggest as part of this whole planning that the idea of funding for events is something I know you that we should look at as you're doing the budget for next year, especially things like this that are cooperative where businesses and contribute as well, because it can sort of go a long way, especially at specific times where we know it's slow and it's trying to drive it out for people. That was basically it. Did I miss anything?
This was all Jeffrey. So the idea was his, and he brought it forward and did all the follow-up and got everything done, and I was his assistant. And I just want to tell you how grateful I am to have Jeffrey on board downtown and helping us out, because he's an awesome guy.
Congratulations.
Yes. And thank you for doing it, and it's the kind of thing we hope through this committee we can do more of. So we really appreciate you stepping up and doing it. And success always helps move it forward in the future. So thank you.
Thank you. Other public comment?
Okay.
Well, as long as I'm here. So I have submitted for a new business in downtown Palm Springs that you'll probably be seeing this lookbook for a dispensary lounge. You know, I didn't really support them being in downtown on Palm Canyon, but I found a location that isn't actually on Palm Canyon, and I just wanted to bring it up that it's been a very long time since I have had a new business really downtown, and I'll be interested in telling you how it goes.
Okay, so
Thanks.
always helpful to hear the experience, so thank you.
Thank you. Any
you.
other public comment if you want to raise your hand? Otherwise, we'll move forward, seeing none, to presentation. So we have the Coachella Valley Economic Partnership, or CVEP. We have Joe Wallace with the iHub Accelerator, and we have Sue Becca, Hank McCarrick as well. Do you want to come forward for the presentation? You can sit at the table here.
Council members, let me just briefly include that as we submit quarterly reports from CVEP, we were asked to possibly bring forward, have Joe come in, give a presentation to the full city council, and I think this might be a good venue to do this at also. And I believe Joe also suggested a tour or some kind of a tour of the facilities that they have, but let me go on and let Joe start. Oh, and in your package is the latest quarterly report that will be submitted to the full city council.
Okay. So Kathy asked me to keep it to about 5 minutes, and so I'm just going to run through. This is business retention and expansion, and that topic is sort of like what we do with iHub, but it's not. It's broader, and a lot of times it's more retail focused. So I'm just going to kind of go through what it is, and the guy that's going to follow me, Hank McCarrick, is inventor with many patents, and we kind of took him under our wing here. What's it been, Hank? 4 or 5 years ago? And he's got some very prominent investors. He's on the verge of a big success, and now we want to retain him. Then we want him to create those jobs and see that wealth created here in the city of Palm Springs, because that's who has supported him all these years. So getting on with it. So in retention and attraction, they're both really the same thing. The first question is, can this business be done in a specific location? And the answer changes over time. So somebody that decided 10 years ago to start a business here, if they want to grow, if they've gotten digitally more in depth, their requirements might change. So just because somebody chooses you at one time, as their business matures and grows, you have to stay on top of things. The bandwidth has to be there for them if they need it. Facilities need to be sufficient. Their supply chain needs to be in place, and all of the things that it takes to get a business up and running. If they answer that question, can you do this here? Then the second question comes up, it's a detailed analysis. It's what are the revenue prospects? What are the operating costs? What kind of a workforce do you need? And does a certain region have it? What's the opportunity for growth? And can you run your business profitably in a certain location? If you get through both of those, and this works for expansions, retentions, and attractions all the same way, that's when lifestyle comes in. We always win on lifestyle, but if we don't win on the first two, you don't get to ask that question. And so what does CVEP do with business retention and expansion in particular? We have a series of seminars, usually every Wednesday morning. We have one somewhere. They can be from business planning. We do a lot of them on financial literacy, because startup companies, especially ones that are not tech, don't really have the training that it takes to know how to start a business, build a pro forma, do these things. And then we have this little discussion with them where okay, you think you want to be an entrepreneur, but do you really want to be an entrepreneur because it's hard? or should you just get a job? Because, if you want to start a coffee shop, Starbucks pays $54,000 for a manager, and they give them benefits. You might work 10 years in your own coffee shop before you make that much money. Just go work for Starbucks. They've got it figured out. And a lot of times that's the best advice that we can give, and we do want to try and help those people as individuals when they come in. We do a lot of one-on-one consultations. Many of them, they come in by website, by word of the mouth, so it's direct contacts. But we get leads from other entities too. We had a walk-in today that's from the Women's Business Center, and she had heard, gee, we need to go talk to CVEP, so in she came, and hopefully we were able to help her. That's what we do. And the iHub clients, like Hank that you're about to meet, we know more about their businesses because we talk to them at least weekly. So we're in continuous contact. We know when they're building a supply chain. We even know when they're going to ship a product. And the thing that we're really helping them with is assistance with change management as they go from a person with an idea to a company with a product that's competing in really world markets. External influences, these are things that we can help with, that perhaps the city can help with, but access to capital is always an issue. And a loan is usually the form of capital that small businesses are getting, because equity investors don't invest in small, micro businesses, and we have a lot of them. Incentives, you have some hotel programs that have been very successful. You've had facade programs that are successful, and that's sort of an access to capital too, because it adds value to the businesses. And then there's talent. All of our iHub companies, when it comes time to hire, and you're looking for whether it's a marketeer, another engineer, a programmer, it's there's a lot of competition for talent out there now, and it's really hard to get the right people, whether it's management, technology, or other types of the workforce. And then there's demographics, which is what customers are local, where you're going to get your revenue from, and what proximity do we have to other large markets. I mean, a lot of our success at the iHub, I believe, is because we're within, I believe it's a 4-hour drive of 40 million people, if you include going into Mexicali and Tijuana, and it's about 2 hours to 20 million in the United States. So we try to leverage our location as much as we possibly can, because we are a low-cost, good lifestyle opportunity in Southern California. We have the vibe, we have the location, and a lot of times we try to catch people that are on their way to Arizona and get them to take the exit here. I pushed the button. And this is my last slide before I let us decide to keep and retain Hank and Subecca when they're here. It's that traditional business characterization, and what happens a lot of times is you have a staff of about 3 people. We don't have enough to do this, but this is you organize an effort, and you're continuously polling, gathering data, and analyzing the data so that you have a really good data-driven snapshot of what your business complement is, whether it's in your city or your region. And these are good things to do, and I think we understand maybe 10% of what we have. It's the things that we are tasked with helping. The SBDC will have a different understanding. The Women's Business Center will have a different understanding. And about as soon as you've gotten the report done, and Nona will have an understanding because she's with those small businesses all the time, then you have to do that over. And it's just a continuous process of mapping the type of business companies that you have in your region. And with that, I'll just say let's all elevate together, and I think Mr. McCarrick will be up unless you have some questions for me.
Just one, as you went through all the different things you offer, seminars, et cetera, how is that publicized, and how could we help members of the public who might be interested in starting a business or those in a business to know what's available?
Okay, we have a weekly newsletter, and it's become more like a twice-weekly newsletter, and it's all publicized through that. We've got about 7,000 unique email addresses. We've just launched a online blog, and we're putting in original content 3 times a week, and it's content that's kind of tailored for attraction, like, why did I leave the Bay Area? You could probably write an article for it too, and so any format that you have to reach the public, we would publish our articles and our events on that too. So talk good about us, we'll talk good about you, and we'll all do better.
Great, thank you.
I have a question too. So we did ask that you attended this meeting and present, because you're doing so much important work on economic development and business attraction and retention. And so this is not to put you on the spot, but just thinking about what the city can do for incentives or other assistance to the small businesses that you work with, or as a region. And we've talked a lot at this subcommittee that diversifying our economy and making sure that there are good paying jobs for people here is really important. And so as we think about other business incentives, as we, we've done hotel incentives, like you said, we've done facade improvement incentives, but other ideas about how the city can help. And so I won't put you on the spot now, but maybe you'll come back to some of our meetings, or you can kind of write to us and give us some input on that, or work with staff.
I'd love to, and there are things that are more impactful than others, but you have to decide what it is that you want to have, and that's where you put the incentive.
I know you do important work about internet infrastructure and ensuring that we can support the businesses of the future. So we'll continue this conversation offline, but feel free to participate in these standing meetings, and we'd love your expertise.
All right, thank you.
So you're going to bring up Hank McCarrick with Subecca.
For the reading glasses. I'm going to talk about a smart city initiative that really falls on the theme that Joe just presented, about business retention. Oh, thank you. Can you hear me now? Okay, all right. Yeah, this initiative is sponsored by Comcast. It's a division of Comcast called MachineQ. And what Comcast is doing is they're providing a incentive to cities for accelerating the deployment of smart city products and devices. And this network is MachineQ, and I want to discuss MachineQ and how the city can get MachineQ kicked off here. So what is MachineQ? It's the long-range networks that support sensors and devices. And these devices are typically battery operated. They might be mobile devices, or devices don't have the luxury of being plugged into the wall. And so they have two needs. They need to extend long reach, and they have to last a long time on batteries, and sometimes in excess of 10 years. And the network supplies hundreds of thousands of devices, so it's a large capacity network. Deployed in Palm Springs, it could likely support millions of devices if deployed in mass. To date, there's about 1,000 products that can run on the MachineQ network, and I'll get into some of those. The Comcast Smart City Starter Kit consists of 3 MachineQ gateways, and Comcast is charging $5,000 for those 3 gateways. And another $5,000 for installation, and free subscription for 1 year. So a total budget to kickstart Smart City, this Smart City initiative is $10,000. So just talk about example products: smart utility meters, parking sensors, air quality sensors, trash bin level, health monitoring, cold chain management. This is where you're monitoring the refrigeration temperatures, make sure your food is preserved correctly, and even rodent control. Believe it or not, there's a smart mouse trap that resides on this network and tells you when it caught a mouse, right? So it'll save the exterminator a few trips out to the home. And if you want to go to the MachineQ site, you'll see quite a list of business partners. We've actually deployed the MachineQ network in Desert Hot Springs. We're a graduate of the iHub, as Joe mentioned, and what we have developed is a smart metering technology, specifically water metering. And we've deployed the network for the Mission Springs Water District. The Department of Water Resources provided us a grant to test our technology for the water agency. The technology is certainly a first of its kind. It's going to provide water customers information about water use like they've never had before. And the uniqueness about this is while we're reading meters, smart meters, we're also deploying a network that has high value to the population at large with all the other products. Just real quickly on the Mission Springs Water District project, this is up and running. This is a dashboard that the customer would get. This shows them real-time usage during the day. They can actually see an event and how much that event cost them, as an example, irrigation. If they have a problem with their water, they'll get an email alert. And in fact, they can shut their water off. This says valve control. And so if they're out in New York City, you know, and then they have a problem, they can literally get their phone and terminate water flow to their home. And this is a service that will be provided by the water agency to the customer. And it's certainly a service like none existed before, but it rides on the MachineQ network. I did a map of where we could possibly put these gateways if indeed the city took advantage of this initiative. I have mapped a gateway on the convention center, one on the College of the Desert Palm Springs campus, the new campus here, and one at the iHub, which is one word, iHub Accelerator campus here. So you're covering about, with those 3 gateways, about 50% of the population here. For full coverage, you probably need about 6 or 7 gateways ultimately. But this is a good kickstart to, to engage, a large part of the population. Now, what is the value to the City of Palm Springs? Clearly, it will support Joe's efforts when he has innovators that are focused on the digital transformation, IoT technologies. And the obvious, by deploying these gateways, you'll provide value to the businesses, to the city, and to the population at large that can take advantage of all the offerings that the MachineQ partners can offer. And that's it.
Fascinating. Thank you so much. Thank you for the presentation.
Where can we find out more?
I heard the question, where can we find out more? If you want to answer before you walk away, Hank?
You certainly can contact Joe, or you can contact me directly. Kathy has my information.
Perfect.
There'll be quite a bit of publicity about the Mission Springs Water District project.
Thank you. We have a public comment or question. Hi, Dieter.
Hi, my name is Dieter Crawford, live in the Desert Highland Gateway Estates neighborhood, and this question is more probably for Joe as well. Can those products be like compatible to the marijuana industry or the cannabis industry? And as far as the iHub, what are we doing to attract marijuana businesses? Not necessarily as cannabis grows, but I know they have one business that is a lighting manufacturer or something of that nature. I would like to see the iHub try to market more to the cannabis industry as well, not just cultivation, but, with products of that nature.
We have 2 companies that are in that space. One you mentioned, which is Tuned LED lighting supplier. The cannabis leaf has preferred wavelengths of light. It grows better in certain kinds of light, and there's one of our companies supplies the lights. We have a second one that has a delivery for when you have it delivered to your house. It's a device, let's call it a big storage deal that you can segregate the types, I guess, if one person wants one for headache and another one wants one for fun. There's different cannabis products, and it keeps them apart. It keeps them from cross-contaminating each other, and it also has a secure place to put currency, so that you can transport your medicine or your cannabis, and you can protect the currency that you're picking up too. And it keeps your person who's a delivery person from stealing the money as well. So we bring in, any company that wants to talk to us that's in the cannabis space, we do talk to them. Our facilities aren't really large enough or equipped with the air handling capacity that cannabis needs. But, we want to see this succeed at the retail level and at the grow level, and we'll accept them like we would any other business.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you so much, Joe. Thank you for all of your work. So next we have the fiscal year 2020 and 2021 budget request and allocation. Staff report.
Yes, just as a touch base again before full city council approves the budget, what you have in front of you is the draft proposed budget for the community and economic development activities. You will see that the hotel incentive program previously included here is now removed. Facade improvement program is budgeted at $100,000 for the next 2 years. However, we do anticipate approximately another $100,000 to be carried over from the current year. And you'll also see in contractual services, we are now absorbing the cost for security services and regional partnerships with CVAP, iHub, and of the new revised Sunline bus payments will also be coming out of the Community and Economic Development Department. What you're not seeing here are some items that we had previously discussed, such as a vacant storefront program, parking strategies, and other consultants to assist with creating new districts for revenue generation. Now, that being said, we do want to hear from the subcommittee on any additions here or changes that they'd like to see based on the previous conversations we've had and any other information they would like to bring in.
So it's this chart, right?
That's correct.
And that's available to the public?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so, and then we're primarily looking at the bottom, is that right, with the incentives and other items that you mentioned?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, thank you. You have questions?
Yeah, and so I'm going to look to our city attorney. It's a public meeting. I'm also on the budget subcommittee. Is there any issue with that, since they're both, there's some overlap, clearly, as we talk about budget items?
No, I mean, we're talking in general enough terms.
Right,
so it's
okay,
fine.
I just want to double check. And just confirming, so the TOT Hotel Incentive Program, the reason there's no money in that here is because it's moved over to a different department, to finance, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Are there any staff recommendations on things that should be in the budget to help drive our economy?
Right, and so I had asked for this item too, to talk about incentives, and if we need to include, like last year, we included a budget request that was funded for our incentive work. And so that's what we've been talking about at the subcommittee level, is what can we do to continue to grow our economy, especially as our costs increase. Do you want to respond to that?
Well, one thing that I would note is, I just want to confirm, so you have the 100,000 for the facade improvement, correct, in this budget, correct, Jay?
That's correct.
100 each year. In addition to this, and this was at the recommendation of the subcommittee, what's going to be in the budget you'll see next Wednesday is the additional 100,000, which is for the new downtown uptown marketing plan, which in theory would be run through potentially this budget business retention.
So there are two items that have been requested. One was 100,000 for promoting Uniquely Palm Springs, which is our,
Thank you.
right, both we're talking about, right?
Yes, correct.
So the request was 100,000 to promote Uniquely Palm Springs, which is an effort that is underway with our Palm Springs Bureau of Tourism, and the Chamber's been partnering to promote our unique local businesses that don't exist anywhere else, don't have the marketing budgets of some of the national brands that are coming in. So there's already, that effort is already underway. The idea was to help promote that. You know, most of our tourism promotion actually goes drive market for overnight stays, and the goal of this was actually to promote drive market, people who can come in, spend a day, spend a night, go to restaurants, shop in our stores. So we want to, and people in Palm Springs even, to know about all the unique opportunities here. So that was that piece. The other was that we really haven't done anything with there's so much, especially in the uptown, downtown, that's new. In fact, we were just talking about that before the meeting, the need to update the map. And we want to really promote it and promote all that's here so people come and shop and stay. So it's really putting money with the goal of driving more money for our local businesses. Of course, when they do well, the city does well, because that's how we generate our tax revenue. So that's an additional 200 over our normal tourism budget. And so I don't know what the price, you can figure out where the right place for that is, whether it's economic development, whether that's really tourism. However you think best on that. But I just want to explain what those numbers were for.
I would think that the uniquely Palm Springs, well, the marketing uptown, downtown likely through tourism, and uniquely Palm Springs, could either run through here or tourism, depending upon which the stakeholders and you think would be better.
I mean, I think where it is in the budget is up to you. I think it needs to be folks in the tourism organization who do the work, because they're the expertise on doing ads, buying ads, doing social media. That's where the expertise is. But whether we want to have a little subcommittee who is involved in that with the Bureau of Tourism, like we do with the small hotels, and to really help advise on that might make sense for that. I think that might be helpful to get that input from the businesses, right?
Okay.
Yeah, both Main Street and the Chamber who are involved, and get input from the local businesses on what they think would be the most helpful. I think would be really smart.
Sure.
So, first of all, thank you. This is terrific. I've never seen this before in Palm Springs. So, and I do think, I want to mention one of the larger hotel owners in town recently gave a speech where they, not in town, but where they said restaurants and retail are actually big drivers for hotels, and which obviously makes sense. People don't want to go stay in a hotel if there's nowhere to eat or shop nearby. One thing I would ask is, since we've shown some initial success with doing events, if something could potentially be carved out or just at least covering that as well. And the other thing I wanted to just mention with the facade improvement program, I heard you mentioned how Palm Desert does a lot more, but it's great what you do. The only suggestion I would make is that for some cases, I think you're actually paying for facade improvements because business owners aren't in a position to demand it of the landlords, which is part of the vacant storefront. So if somebody's moving into a vacant storefront and the windows are all graffitied and scratched up, unfortunately, the city's the one and the tenants are paying to do it, and things like that should be required of the landlord to keep up, I would suggest.
And that's something we should look at with a vacant storefront ordinance that I talked about
I don't know
previously.
how to do that. The last thing is whether, I know, and this is a bit selfish, but sometimes, you can't get a second facade grant. Maybe there's a certain period after which somebody could apply for another one, if it's 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, I don't know.
Right, so that's why I raised the facade improvement program and just the amount that we're budgeting for economic development incentives. So I believe last year, what was our budget request at the last cycle, wasn't it? 250,000. So just to be clear, this year it's 100,000 for the facade improvement program, and then 100,000 for Uniquely Palm Springs, which came out of tourism. So my comment at City Council was that the City of Palm Desert actually can offer up to $75,000 per project for facade improvement and building improvement. So if we're doing smaller grants at $100,000, that might not be enough to really compete with other cities and actually to improve the facades for downtown business owners or other business owners. So that's what I really wanted to talk about with this item. And like I said at the city council meeting, I think we need to be actually quite aggressive in incentives. And I'm looking here at other incentives. So I see that the budget has job creation incentive that's at 0, but is listed there. And I know we've talked about other incentives as well at this committee. So that's really what I'm interested in. What amount can we really budget, because we know that we want to do really
Right.
important incentive work to grow the economy and keep it going, especially as we might face a small downturn in the next 2 years or so. We're not sure, but I just want to plan for that.
Well, I would suggest, I mean, we had a very robust program that was well exceeded Palm Desert. I mean, you would get, up to a $250,000 grant if you put in $750. So one good example of that is Mr. Lyons. I think they were a $150,000 grant. So at that time, I think council put in about, Kathy, 700,000, $1 million,
Close to
close to $1 million.
Close to $1 million, because we had the large incentive program, which was the 250, and we had 25,000 for interior remodel and 5,000 for exterior.
So, if we want to do that, I think that maybe the best path would be, at the budget meeting Wednesday, from the subcommittee, just a recommendation to do that, and that would just come from fund balance, maybe a very, well worth expenditure. Because I think if you let's just say you put, let's start with $300,000 and see where that gets the program going. My sense is you may spend that in the first year, but then then you replenish it. But at least you start with the seed money, and maybe we go back to at least the $50,000 level, and we'll see where that goes. And if it's successful, then that sort of adds to the excitement of, we should continue to fund it.
So I think what would be most helpful then is to have some options when we're at the budget meeting on Wednesday. I don't think we'll have them by the time the staff report goes out tomorrow, but to have some options to discuss that if we need to even do it in the second meeting, but I think, so at least we can discuss it as part of the budget.
Yeah, and what worked previously is, because, take some time with some stakeholder input and subcommittee input of how the project will actually unfold in terms of the criteria, where at least we do a pot of money from budget, say it's 100,000, 200, 300, with the details to be followed.
Okay.
Right.
Okay, but I think that would be my recommendation.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree. So that's what we did last year, is we just allocated the $250,000, and then we did this public process with stakeholders, with the community, to talk about what incentives those should be. But I do think we need a lot more clarity from staff about options and best practices from other cities. Even looking at what other cities are doing, I continue to say that we're competing, although other cities are our neighbors and our friends. We're also competing for jobs and for growth, for retail, for all of our industries. So we have to be looking at what those other cities are doing. So if we can really bring back some good menu of options about incentives to this next meeting.
Well, some criteria would be helpful. Are we, as we discuss potential downturn, city revenues, should we look to revenue-generating businesses, which is, as you know, a big push for why so many cities attend the retail convention, is to attract those retail businesses. So there's that. And we already have a hotel program that we'll be discussing later in the agenda, but if it's focused on revenue, does that help drive the types of businesses? And let me be clear, that's probably just one component of a program, because the uniqueness, the small businesses also are a very important quality to what attracts people to Palm Springs. And, getting away from the chain restaurants, I think, is a big draw for Palm Springs also. So developing those takes time and maybe some financial assistance to get new restaurants to open up. And if I'm hearing right, the previous incentive program we had was pretty sizable. But I can tell you, restaurants are one of the biggest sales tax producers in the city. So,
Yeah.
okay.
Let me ask, two more things. One is, we really don't have an idea on cost. Nona and I had an initial meeting to really talk about, whether it's with a consultant, to really work with businesses on, we've seen a bunch of turnover on businesses, on, looking at what's missing in Palm Springs, what would do well, right? We have, what could help an existing business do better? And so we just had an initial talk on how we do something like that, and so it's just a first conversation, but it's something we might want to talk about. We can always add something, later, obviously, when we look at the budget, but it is something I just want to share that we've started meeting on to really,
Well,
and
that
it
would
and it
go-
applies to existing businesses as well, right, who aren't
Right.
doing well. Is there stuff they can do that would,
Right. No, that goes a long way in terms of targeting
Right.
who the incentive should be
Right.
directed
Yeah.
at, so.
so having some funding for that piece of it, because we need a consultant to really help us figure out what is missing, what would the demand be, what kind of business? Because we want to incentivize businesses that are actually, would be in demand, right?
Right.
So that's helpful. I have another question on the budget. So in the second to last item, you have Desert Healthcare at 100,000. One thing I'm aware of is the wraparound services grant.
Right. This was in a prior year as we were allocating funding for, because with our wraparound service grant, we had to front the additional
Right.
funds for that project. So it was budgeted here, but as you can see, we zeroed it out and have moved it to homeless programs.
So it's moving over to homeless. Okay.
Yeah.
And then, and the community crisis teams is not in here at all. That hasn't been in here.
That's correct. That's
Okay.
actually under homeless programs also.
Okay.
In the homeless programs budget page, I
And
should say.
when we look at that, we should just be, sorry, slight aside, but the community service officer, I think we have in the police budget and probably should be, it's part of the matching grant from the Desert Healthcare District. So the numbers show a lot less of a match in that sheet that we did for what we spend on homelessness than we actually do, because they pay for that whole team. They're not just paying for the 2 people. They're matching a whole team. That whole team is 4 people, not 2. So it's not just 165,000. We can't hire 4 people for 165,000, I think, in any position. So anyway, we just need to look at those numbers. I didn't want to forget that while we were here. The other thing I wanted to mention, I put a note and it's following up on what Jeffrey said, is, like the 1,000 for the pop-up, are those things that should be budgeted? And 2 points, just 5,000 for that, or is that just we can do one-offs? What's the best way to do that? And so that was a question to think about. The other is, PS Resorts is who gets funded for driving, right, tourism, including retail and restaurants. So, at the last meeting yesterday, they funded something that's not going to cause anyone to come visit Palm Springs from out of the region for an overnight stay, but that will draw people here to go to restaurants, bars, retail, attractions. So one thought I had on that is to go to them maybe with a, go to PS Resorts with a, we'd like to do 10,000 to do this kind of promotional events over the next year. That might be the best avenue. And if that doesn't work, come back to us. So
And that was my question too, is we also have the grants and sponsorships with the city, and so we have that cycle. So
For
people
economic-
do apply for events for the city to fund seed money or in-kind donations for police support or whatever it is for events. And so sometimes we'll take those and give them to PS Resorts because they have an economic impact, but that's also an option. But it could be that we would want to think about budgeting
Yeah.
for this subcommittee.
Because you don't have anything in here, Jay, or unless you're.
No, I
looking
believe
at the-
that comes out of another cost center.
Like-
It's not included in this department budget. However, I think it actually comes out of
What are you referring to? What comes out of?
like the $1,000 we spent
the,
for the pop-up event. Where did that
Right.
come from? Do we know?
It came from your budget. It came from, which,
Our economic development program.
yeah,
Okay.
which is where on here?
Is that this second to last on the first page?
65110.
Yeah, okay, so they're 100,000.
So what all is included? Because I had that circled as a question as well.
well, it's, to the extent funds are available to transfer for events like that, it's there.
These are the small
but-
items. that-
Right,
out
small
of the pot.
items.
Okay.
So that's a
Yeah.
source we could use for it?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Yep.
So yes, there is money there, which is good for us to know.
Just to say, it's helpful to know because in planning this event, we did everything sort of, bare bones because we didn't know if there would be any money. It's easier to go plan something for next year, the fall, knowing there's at least a potential, that we could come to.
Yeah, and I think the best thing would probably be, once you have something in mind, bring it to the next meeting here.
Yes.
And maybe together we can talk about the PS Resorts offline, about applying sort of on an annual basis for some of those kind of events. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Other comments?
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, so can we make a recommendation from this subcommittee to bring to the full council for some seed money to include
Right.
in the budget for this subcommittee?
So question, so we're putting together the final,
I know.
when we've got some ads in there, and so some direction, we can do one of two things. We can, because anything we add will be then at a deficit. So I can go ahead and put it in as a subcommittee recommendation, or we raise it on the floor. So we put it in, then we show the deficit, or we raise it on the floor, and it's just if a preference that you might have.
And I'm sorry to do this, and so next year we'll remember to bring this to this subcommittee before the budget goes forward, because it is really important, I think, to include, and I would hate to see us not include it. Do you have a preference on how we do that?
I don't have a preference as which way you do it that way, but I think it needs to be highlighted in the staff report as a request, so the public knows about it and the council knows about it, instead of just, coming up for the first time that night. So,
Okay.
I know doing the calculation when the staff report goes out tomorrow may be a challenge, but on the page of, sort of new items that you have.
Well, that's easy. No, I
That
can
may
do
be
that.
the way to do
I
it.
can do that. But the question, so we'll include in the staff report as a recommendation for these reasons. I understand, but that's what we will do.
Okay.
That's easy.
Okay.
Thank you.
And just we want to go with 300, was it 200, 300?
350.
350,
Yes.
okay, thanks.
Thank you. And again, investing in our economy to grow the jobs and the revenue, I mean, we can't afford not to. So it's money well spent. The next item is update on business liaison activities and startup assistance. Staff report, please.
So, actually, Joe Wallace identified.
Your mic.
Joe Wallace identified some of the services they do, and the question was posed: how do you get this out to the public? And so, one thing we've been working on that's in your package is just a simple mailer that identifies the different business resources available to Palm Springs businesses, all not one business organization, but just sort of the collective of what is available. And we are coordinating that through Kathy, of course, so individuals can contact her. She can screen, do a preliminary recommendation based on need, and let them know which of these organizations might help them with where they're at, whether it's starting a business, whether it's searching for capital, whether it's a facade program. So we'd be able to provide assistance with that. So we will be getting that printed and out. The other item on this matter has to do with just the status on the facade program. As we discuss investing in our community, we have dispersed or have requests for $134,000 worth of facade improvements so far this fiscal year. And the business investment side, not including the facade investment part, is $167,000. So more than 100% investment back into Palm Springs businesses, be it in the physical infrastructure of the buildings. So that's been very successful.
Great. Two questions. So one of the things we've talked about in past meetings is, and maybe it exists now, sort of a one-pager that sort of says, starting a business in Palm Springs, you need to get this permit and this license, and this is where to go, that we could have as both a handout and on the website.
We do have information on the website. It's found in a couple of
Yeah.
places, one on economic development, but
Right.
also on the planning department. And both kind of switched to refer back to each other.
Right.
One of the other key things that we are going to work on to highlight on our website is a state website called CalGold. CalGold is a permit assistance center, so you can search by city and industry and know what permits you need to get. The challenge to just do a one-pager, we can do that in general, but beauty salon requires
Sure.
a whole host of things. Restaurant, same thing. So from a general standpoint, we could do this. On the planning department's page, there is a section for business and merchants, which is super helpful because it refers to signage, which is a big deal, especially in uptown and downtown. And there's other things that are, important. So
Yeah.
it's there,
Right.
it's just,
Right, I think, and what I hear is it's just people look and they don't know what to, and just having a big, button, starting a business and say, here are the 3 pages to go to even would be helpful, I think.
and we could probably do that. We
Yeah.
can put some things together,
That'd be great.
so.
And I think that Cal Gold thing's great, so, and it'll be really helpful for folks, so thank you. And then on the incentive program, and I guess we can discuss this sort of at council, is whether we want to up that at all.
Right.
Right? The amount of the incentive. I mean, our goal, I think Palm Desert's really focused on, part of Palm Desert, and, we want to distribute these as evenly throughout the city for any business, and do more of them. So, but we can talk about that at council if there's a number, if we want to go up to 7,500, if we think that would help.
So you don't think that we should bring back to the subcommittee first before going to council, sort of what are other cities doing, what are options, and then bring the
Yeah, we
recommendation?
can do that unless we're asking for more money, but I think there's 200 in the next 2 years and there's money rolled over, so
Right.
I think we can keep where we're at and then bring that up to, put that on the next agenda to sort of.
Sure.
What are some of the other
Just,
cities doing?
process-wise, someone who's recently gone through the facade program, if they now hear we're increasing the available amount, granted their project's underway and done, but would we open that up to them also? Is that something you would consider? Think about?
So what I think we should do is look at what other cities are doing and what those look like and what are best practices. And then I think we should also think about our needs from the business community as well and from residents and the public. What are our needs? And so what do we need to do? What are the buildings that need incentives? I think a lot about South Palm Springs around the curve. There's a lot of old restaurants there that are just sitting vacant. We've talked a lot about vacant storefront ordinance, but I do think we want to think really strategically about what are the needs for the types of storefronts that we need. And this was, the amount right now isn't a lot to really change a building in any way. So just if staff could analyze those options and then the needs, and if you have feedback and input about what that would look like, you have you're experts and you have access to people impacted, and you can bring some of that to the next meeting.
Yeah, and I
Does
think
that
that's a
sound
good time to talk about what we do to maintain when we have vacant storefronts. So this money isn't going in to repair, keyed windows or damaged windows because the landlord's not maintaining them. Because that's not the goal of this. We'd rather the money go beyond that if we can. So,
That'd
Okay.
be great.
great, thank you.
Thank you. Next item is provide direction to staff on the Buxton proposal.
At our last meeting, we had a presentation from Buxton who was offering to bring forward services to assist us with targeting retailers, particularly grocers, and to develop a plan to help incentivize grocers to come to certain locations in the city. And there's no additional material, I'm sorry. And they also offered what folks refer to as being kind of creepy is a business tool that would be available to a handful of businesses to let them know when their customer is in town. By knowing their customers, it's more than a demographic. I think they know their customers' spending habits because they have this unique relationship with Visa, so they know what the customers purchase, and they ping their phones. So if they are in town for any particular reason, it is an opportunity for a local merchant to say, ping at them and say, hey, we're having a special. And so those were the services we had discussed. They have a big presence at ICSC, which they offer to allow to work with us to work meet with prospective tenants, ICSC being the International Conference of Shopping Centers, to work with them at their booth to meet with prospective businesses and tenants for Palm Springs. And so just as what could be part of a strategy or not for doing outreach through conventions like that, particularly to the retail segment, is something this firm would bring to the table for us. Now, they also seem to have one of the more aggressive and capable ways of meeting with grocers and finding ways to get them into areas in the city considered to be food deserts. So, which is going to take a long time to happen, I believe, but they had those relationships already.
So do we have a proposal to review, or are we going to get that at the next meeting?
Well, at the last meeting, their proposal was
Well, they talked
essentially
about it, but,
$50,000.
Yeah, and I think what may be helpful, we had the proposal, we didn't do anything with it, and we weren't certain if there was still, because it was a large dollar, and we weren't certain of the results. So do we want to continue discussing it further, or should we just let it sort of slide, I think is more of a...
I think the area we're most interested in, which led to, I think, them coming, was the food desert issue, which is sort of our next agenda item. So why don't we talk about it in that context? I think more so than the, visa tracking of people. It was really the food desert that led to that. So I think that, at least for me, that's the interest. You may have more of an interest in being tracked.
No such thing
We're
as
all
privacy.
being tracked. Yeah.
Though I am regretting using my card for most purchases instead of cash. For me, I just need more information about if staff has a recommendation, if we've reached out to stakeholders like developers who have attempted to get grocery stores or other stores, if they would need this data, the people from our region who attended ICSC, who might have experience. I think we had asked about other cities who've used Buxton and if they've gotten a return in their investment.
Well,
I know we
what-
have in the past,
What I
but
suggest
all
is
of that information.
We've done a lot with Buxton in the past for a lot of years, and I don't know that it ever really delivered what it promised for us or the other stakeholders, but that was just then. But what Buxton was hugely helpful on was in the things that we did, at the Springs and a few others in the downtown, but the high-tech programs that they sold us never really delivered. So, I can't, this is a new thing, and this might be great.
And I don't have the proposal in front of me, so I can't say if we can,
Yeah.
have just if it's portioned out. So there's a portion for the high tech services, the creepy Big Brother stuff that we don't want. There's a portion for the food, the grocery store receipts that we're more interested in. I mean, I think we just need to parse that out more for the
And then
proposal.
reaching out to some cities, not necessarily ones they say we should reach out to, who've used them to get some honest feedback on whether those have been effective. Because if it's been effective, great. If it's not, we don't want to spend the money. Okay.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yes, this was, it's a very big challenge to bring retail into areas that retail doesn't naturally flow to.
Right.
So Buxton seemed to show the most promise at getting a plan to go there, but whether or not it actually happens or that desired outcome occurs is no one can tell.
Right.
It's more so how far do we want to go with trying to get retail into difficult areas, which can be difficult. So, okay.
I'm really still interested in the proposal, especially in talking to people who have developed retail in Palm Springs and learning that the numbers and the data don't provide for the need in and of itself, even though those of us on the ground know that there's the need. So I am still interested in keeping this and moving it forward.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I just have to add one thing just to let you all know that I've used Buxton's high-tech mapping and other demographic, psychographic information, and that's actually how we got the FedEx ground up at the north end, the new facility.
Great.
Thank you.
That's helpful.
To a site selector.
No, that's helpful.
So
Thank you.
there is some value there.
Yeah.
And also you were asking what we need. They do that kind of report.
Right. Okay. Great.
as far as retail.
Yeah, and if we can get on that, and obviously having those proposals in front of us, but if we can get, all the documents out, both to us and the public before the meeting, I think that really helps us make the meetings more productive.
Yes.
So we'll bring that to the
yeah,
next meeting and
yes.
plan on taking action on it, which would just be a recommendation to city council, right?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll move forward on the next item, which is discuss Fine Food Bank programs to address food deserts. And we have Fine Food Bank here, so
Yay.
please join us at the table.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you for coming. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having us. We appreciate it. I'm Debbie Espinosa. I'm the president and CEO of Fine Food Bank. And
I'm
this
sorry,
is-
could you use the mic and turn it on? We have viewers at home, so if you could speak into that, thank you.
Good evening. I'm Debbie Espinosa. I'm the president and CEO of Fine Food Bank, and we appreciate you having us here today. And this is Lorena Marroquin, and she's our director of community impact. And so we were asked today to come and talk with you about food deserts, and specifically about one community in particular that we've been working very much with Jay and Kathy on, as they have worked with the community and have identified some concerns with regards to food and food access. They contacted and reached out to the food bank to help us, or to allow us to help them analyze from our perspective and the work that we've been doing in the desert community for over 35 years now. The analysis with regards to not just the data, but also what we have seen realistically that sometimes the data doesn't show. And as we started working with them on it and having the conversations with them on it, the Desert Highlands community, which is the community we're specifically talking about, is in fact meeting the criteria of what we see as a food desert community. A lot of people don't realize that there's actually many factors that go into what we would consider a food desert. Some of it you've talked about already around the table. Not that creepy factor with regards to credit cards. I was trying to figure out a way to put that in, and that was about as close as I can come. But some of the other things that you're talking about, the economic factors that can drive a food desert, not having the ability to easily build retail store facilities within that area for various reasons, different for each one of the communities. We're looking at radiuses around the community with regards to the accessibility of either public transportation, walking distance, utilizing bikes or utilizing cars without having to use too much gas in order to get there. Because as many of you know, and I know the city of Palm Springs has been doing a lot with regards to understanding the socioeconomic factors and all of those things that lie around food insecurity and homelessness. So you know that gas and the ability to get to and from places can completely drive the way in which a household can function and whether or not they have enough resources to be able to get their basic needs. For instance, if a community has to drive over 3 miles just to get to the grocery store, it's 6 miles round trip, which means that they're using, depending on their vehicle, approximately a half gallon to a gallon of gas, which means that this price, $4 a gallon, is quite a lot for somebody that's already struggling economically. When we also looked at the other economic factors that are typically used with the food bank to determine poverty levels, we don't just use standard poverty level of the government, we adjust for the state of California. I just came from the San Francisco Bay Area. In the San Francisco Bay Area, they're adjusting to about 230% of the poverty level in order to be able to accommodate for the cost of living. Here in the desert, we're adjusting at about 180% of federal poverty level for a family of 4. When we looked at the Desert Highlands community demographics, which is a little bit skewed because if you're looking at census tract data, it's incorporating those other outerlying areas that can boost the average income up, even though they're not necessarily affected in the same way that Desert Highlands is. But when we're using that census tract data that, of course, is skewed up, we're still tracking at about 71% that are at about 180% of federal poverty level, which means that it could potentially be higher if we looked at just that community alone, plus the apartment complexes that are across the street that weren't tracked within the data that were there. So you're looking at about plus 400 households that could be, that I wouldn't even say could be, that we're identifying as in need of food insecurity, but don't have the resources around them to be able to easily access food resources. The other thing that we're looking at too as well, when we look at food deserts and the potential of food insecurity and the effects that it could have with regards to homelessness, because a lot of people right now have been doing a lot of research on homelessness. We've been part of the Desert Healthcare District conversations with some of the focus groups. As you know, the food bank, we serve about 85,000 people throughout the desert regions, primarily in the Coachella Valley. Usually when you have food desert areas, a lot of the houses are rental houses. In this case, there's about 50% of the houses that are rental houses in the Desert Highlands community. It's for us, we know when people are at about that poverty level, they're making choices between having to buy food versus paying for rent. Then you tack on the inaccessibility in the food desert area because they don't have easy access to it in order to get it. And now you're really putting people into a stress situation where they're having to choose between one or the other. So a food bank actually comes in not just as food insecurity prevention, we're also homelessness prevention too. Because at a certain point, you can only pay for rent so much before you end up starving and you're going to have to switch over to the other side.
Cassie, do you have a program where you can help potentially bring some sort of program to that area that we could partner with you with?
Yes, absolutely.
Great.
And so
What is that?
So basically what that is this. We have mobile pantries, and we're doing about 19 mobile pantries now in the area, and we have the potential, we have the capability to be able to do more. But we're very specific about the areas that we bring them to because we want to make sure that we're strategically placing them so that whoever is supporting us with that, the funding is being utilized to the best of its ability for the populations that are most in need. The Desert Highlands community is one of those areas that we've identified that we could strategically place and have a win-win situation, not just for food bank or city council, but most importantly, the clients that are living there already. A mobile pantry would look like us loading up our mobile pantry truck, bringing it into the community once a month for 9 months, so September through May, and distributing about 30 pounds of food per family for whoever comes. We estimate in this area, based on the statistics that we have with our other mobile pantries, with an area of about 400 households, we factor maybe about 200 households will be able to come. And then sometimes we've seen them grow as high as 250 to 300, which we have the capacity to serve. In the summertime, there's a lot of kids in that area too as well. The average age in that neighborhood is about 40, and the average amount of people is about 3.19 in the household, which means that they have kids. In the summertime, we actually go to a mobile pantry distribution once a week because the kids don't have free and reduced lunch during that time. And so we actually increase our distribution at the food bank by 40 distribution sites throughout the Coachella Valley, and we could utilize this one as one of our other sites. So we'd be at 41 sites that we're increasing to once a week.
So what could we do to help initiate that?
We would need help funding it. You know, we are a nonprofit organization. For everything that we do, we have to fundraise the money for it, and so we're always constantly looking for strong partners that have the ability to sustainably help us until there's other options for the community to be able to, you know, move and transition to be more self-reliant with regards to that. It could be the research that you're doing to bring in a grocery store. It could be doing so on the population, providing food resources that it helps boost the economy because they're able to perform better at school for kids. They're able to perform better at work.
So do you have an idea of the level of cost of partnership you would need?
Sure, absolutely. For what I just described, which is about 19 distributions, we're looking at somewhere between $50,000 to $60,000 annually. And so it translates to about 40 cents, 45 cents per pound.
So can we get an actual proposal?
Yeah, we can put one together, absolutely.
Okay, so if we could get a proposal, then we could look at some options of funding and potential some other community stakeholder partners.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That would be huge.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we would definitely work with the community too as well to make sure that the advertising, the volunteers, we would need volunteers, but typically the communities, they supply the volunteers because they're very receptive to a mobile pantry coming in because they know it's supporting all of them.
Oh, it's great.
This is fantastic.
Yes,
Thank you
really.
so
Yeah,
much.
absolutely.
We've been talking about this for a year,
Okay.
and we finally brought in the right people to do it for us. So thank you.
you.
You're very welcome.
So I think urgency is a priority here, especially as we go into summer where kids aren't getting
Yes.
school lunches. So I would support bringing that proposal. We have to look at the proposal,
Sure.
but bringing it directly to council as opposed to bringing it back to the subcommittee
Yeah.
so we can
And if we need to put
expedite it.
money in the budget for next week on this, just so it's there. I also have no doubt that between the subcommittee, we can probably, through philanthropy, get that replaced for, I think there are donors who we could reach out to. But I don't want us not to do this while we try and raise the money. I want to first do it and then get that donated back to the city if we can.
And I would just ask.
But I think we can make it revenue neutral, but if it's too important not to get started, especially with school ending right now.
Absolutely.
So how quickly could you get started?
Lorena, what do you think?
Okay.
Tomorrow.
So let's talk about that Wednesday night at the council meeting. then.
And I know we have people who are longtime residents of Desert Highlands here today, so we don't mean to talk about people while they're not at the table. So maybe we can head up after the meeting. We have we don't have a lot of time left, but maybe we can connect after this meeting all together, and we can talk about having community input in that proposal, which I think would be really important. And then my other question is if there's grant funding available. So if you've worked with any other cities or other organizations where we could look at grant funding for this type of thing, because I agree that philanthropy or state or federal funding might be available.
And we've already talked to the community center a little bit too as well as part of our research. And so the community center that's located in there is aware and is excited that there's potential for food bank services.
When is the next community meeting up in Desert Highlands Gateway Estates? It's the second, right? Okay, so maybe there's an opportunity to get that on the agenda, and we, just so we can have that input from the community as well.
So it's June.
Right? I haven't.
It's June 11th at 7 p.m. at James O. Jesse.
The children also have food from the school district as well, so I know that may be an issue or may make it more urgent.
Yeah.
Either way, the children will be fed.
Yeah.
Because we work with the Palm Springs Unified School District.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's all of those combined together that help out in the summertime for sure.
So if you're available, it might be a great opportunity to, because there's a good turnout usually for that meeting.
And I can attend, so I'd be happy to
good.
attend
Sure. I
altogether
can, but that's
and
great.
talk about this on the agenda.
Sounds
be
good.
terrific.
We'll be there.
Thank you so
All right.
much.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
And thanks for working with them for the staff, so.
Thank
that's
you to
great.
staff for making
Yeah.
that happen.
Yeah, that's really great.
So we're at 6:19. We've been
10
here
minutes.
since
Let's go
5.
quick.
We have 10 minutes. So
So good.
it is. It just got
Should
really
we stop
good.
now? Stop now while it's good? Okay.
So we'll move rapid fire through the lightning round. So VIP Motors Business Expansion Assistance Request.
Right, if I could just have Jerry come up and just to make things short. We've had a history of having a successful business assistance program with VIP Motors, and I think Jerry just wants to talk about that a little more.
Yes, Jerry Johnson, representing FDH Enterprises and VIP Motor Cars, proud corporate citizen for many, many years now. And we retail cars. I don't auction them off, so I can't talk extremely fast. And I probably need to, because I saw the faces as you're getting ready to move on to other things in your personal lives. But I appreciate the subcommittee and staff having me here today, and especially on Memorial Day week, because I think it's important not only to remember our fallen heroes, but also to look back at significant milestones in history. And if you'll bear with me just a few minutes, I'll cover my points really quickly. But I think it's important to celebrate what this city has done with a local business. And you guys talked earlier about what type of incentive programs can we put together to make a difference. Well, I'm going to take us back to the turn of the century. It's hard to believe that 2000 is the turn of the century. I still think of 1900, but it's the turn of the millennium. And David, things were not as rosy in Palm Springs as they may be today. In fact, Plaza Motors, which is now Jessup Auto Plaza, had vacated the city. Businesses were fleeing the city. And our desire working with the city leaders was to develop a auto center on East Palm Canyon that would be an economic anchor for the city of Palm Springs. And so we we worked on a program in January of 2000. We entered into an agreement, and the first phase was a redevelopment of the BMW and Mercedes properties there on 4095 and 3919 East Palm Canyon. And that was tremendously successful. All of a sudden, we had a lot more retail of autos in the city of Palm Springs. We had a beautiful facility at that time. By today's standards, it pales in comparison to what we have down there today. But it was very successful, and we quickly saw that we're going to need more space. So we started looking at what was then Indian Alati property to the west of our then facility, and worked tireless hours, and Kathy was around, and it took about 5 years to get through a series of transactions that converted to fee simple land, and we acquired that property, and we built the brand new BMW dealership. But through that process, we extended and amended the agreement that we had then with the redevelopment agency at the time. I think that building speaks for itself on the BMW facility and the expansion, but we reserved a piece of property there to the west for another franchise and hoped that that would come together. And as you guys, if you've seen the Porsche dealership that's now on that property, I think that was a great idea that we had to do that, and the city had a great idea to anchor that. Well, through a number of different, to condense everything, we acquired a collision center that was on Cherokee and incorporated that into a Mercedes operation. We grew and we grew, and we had the mechanism that was in place to facilitate that growth was one that was mutually beneficial. If we didn't perform and we didn't stay, we got nothing. And we had an incentive program. Well, in 2011, we formed Palm Springs Hyundai. Recently, Hyundai has carved out their luxury brand Genesis, and we were the first Genesis dealer in California. We've added Mercedes Sprinter vans, and we've gotten a special dispensation to represent their AMG performance products because of the cachet and the reputation of Palm Springs. They don't just let every dealership do that. So, but all of that growth has brought us today where we want to grow, need to grow, and we don't have any space to grow. Our success is our biggest challenge now. And so my request to the city, to the subcommittee, as you, in your wisdom, seek to continue these types of programs, is that we amend and extend our agreement. Our financial assistance and responsibilities for maintaining businesses in the city is up with the next calendar year. So our final payment will be due then. I would ask that we just keep a good thing going. It has an inflation factor in there, so the city is, it doesn't, is not something that the city doesn't grow with. And so I was requesting about a 10-year increase in the time frame. It was originally, so this was in 2000, we're coming up into 2020, so a 20-year program. I celebrate the success and the wisdom of the city leaders back in 2000. Not that everything we've done over the past 20 years have been good, because we've all made some mistakes, but this was not one of them, and I don't see a reason why we shouldn't keep a good thing going.
Great. Well, thank you. Yeah, so my only, comment is we should put this on a future agenda and get us what the current program is and its results, because it's hard to talk about without really knowing what it is. But happy to have that conversation.
When's that coming before council?
Well, you said
next year.
it's by calendar year, you said.
Is it expired?
He said this year.
Our final payment is due in February of next year.
So we have time, but things sometimes take a while in government. So if we can get that to the subcommittee, and we'll put it on the next agenda if we can.
Thank you for your
That'd
time.
be
and
great.
consideration.
We'll let you know when
Thank you,
that
guys.
is,
Sure.
when it is on the agenda.
Thank you
Okay,
for all of your work
Yeah,
in Palm
thank you.
Springs and your investments. We
Yeah.
appreciate it.
And
Thank you, Jerry.
the new dealership's beautiful, by the way.
It's quite
It
beautiful.
really is a beautiful
Plus, it's in
dealership.
my district.
Not yet.
Not yet. Just kidding. We're getting punchy because we have 4 minutes left. So I would just ask staff if there are any other items that we need to address today, or if we can push those to the next meeting, and then the date and time of the next meeting.
Timing of the hotel program kind of holds up people who are currently in the process hoping to jump into the program based on what could be changes, but it would still have to go to
So I
council.
think maybe what we can do is why don't we send out the proposal to the subcommittee, and then
Yeah,
they
we
can
just
just
got
sort
it.
of direct us if they want us to move forward to the full council, or if when we get some more stakeholder input, I think
Right.
maybe that's. a
Yeah,
good
I think we need
first-
to read it first before we can have a discussion on it.
I
Yeah.
received some of the red lines today, so I'm not prepared to talk about
Right,
it.
you're good.
So we can just give feedback
Yeah.
and then give
Yeah.
recommendations about bringing it to council.
And the other item, the economic development resources, has no particular urgency. However, as we talk about opportunities to identify more funds, be more aggressive, we haven't really had the opportunity to talk about the new resources that are available, such as enhanced infrastructure financing districts, new market tax credits. As I look at John Pavlik, who has come to the city with ideas for it, but we need to get to a point where we can develop a vision for how we'd like to see different parts of the city grow, and then build a district as a financing package around that vision to try and make it happen. And I think those are some of the things that take time, would probably require some consultant work to do the legal boundaries, to do economic analysis on is it worth it? But things like that, and I'm not asking to add to the budget at this point, but just in terms of process, for us to get to that point of creating these districts, which, can we just pull up the one slide of all the other cities that have done it? Which many other cities have already started doing with enhanced infrastructure financing districts and other zones that are available.
This is great. It's really fantastic.
But it's a long conversation.
And it's a long
very long
conversation, so I'd
conversation.
like to add it as a presentation for the next meeting, and we were just saying we should probably have another meeting next month
Yes.
instead of waiting 2 months because we have so much to do. As an aside, I met with a staff member from iBank who actually invests the state. You probably are more familiar with iBank, but invests in these districts for infrastructure and things that businesses might need to start there. So I think that's a great, if we could just do the presentation at the next meeting and have an in-depth conversation about that. Does that work?
Yeah. And we'll work with staff to try and schedule, we'll have our regular scheduled meeting, I guess, in July, the second Tuesday, but also look at potential if we should do a June meeting on some of these things that just are more in-depth and limited to 2 or 3 things that we really have to have longer discussions on. What?
Yeah, what about this town hall event?
We talked about, we're going to do a fall town hall like we did last year, so we just need to pick a day. So what we can do is also, in the meantime, work with Christine and our office on a couple options, and we'll send it out to the organizations to make sure the organizations can attend, and then we could get that solidified. Because, most of the business community is here in September. I don't think we need to wait till October, but we didn't want to do it in August because there's just too many people are gone.
Perfect.
Is that good?
For
Okay.
members of the public, if you'd like to be added to the notice list, if you want to get emails, if we change the meeting or schedule the meeting, you can let Jay know at the end of the meeting and we'll add you to that. Okay, any other items? So we'll just go to subcommittee member comments, announcements if you have
Good.
any.
And then
And then any final comment, if you want any public comment to end the meeting? Seeing none, we will go ahead and adjourn the meeting at 6:31, so just a minute over. Thank you.